Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Happy Wednesday. Really excited to have you here and take you through this new format I call AMA or Ask Me Anything. So I'm going to kick off by giving you just a brief overview of who I am and run through some of the frequently asked questions that I get as an MBA admissions consultant. But I really want this to be interactive. Please feel free to use the chat. I've already gotten a couple questions queued up, so I'm excited to answer those. But as they come to mind, use the chat and I'll be happy to take as many questions during this session as possible. I want to make sure this is beneficial to you and you get the info you need. And, of course, we are available as a resource as well. So if you have not been on one of my webinars before, my name is Laura Nelson. I have a BFA in fine art from Carnegie Mellon University, as you can see here. I led a non-traditional career path going into business school and also coming out of business school. I went to University of Michigan Ross School of Business for the full-time MBA program and was on the admissions committee my second year of the program. Following my MBA, I went into the tech industry in GM and marketing roles. And additionally, alongside that, I've been an MBA admissions consultant for the last 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of candidates on every program imaginable and pretty much have seen and done it all when it comes to specific scenarios and specific outcomes. So happy to hear what's on your mind in this session. And I know a number of you are getting your applications ready for the round one deadlines. So it's really exciting to see that, programs are rolling out their applications. We've seen changes, especially with top programs like Harvard Business School. They made some pretty significant changes to their applications that they announced yesterday. So I'm excited to dive into some of those particulars. But, as I mentioned, this session really is designed around what you are thinking, what you need, and, feel free to use that chat function. I thought I would just get us started by talking through some of the most frequently asked questions that I get as an admissions consultant. And so I thought, maybe that will just get the conversation going. Yeah, and I see questions coming in, so that is great. First off, I'll start off with one that I see quite often, and this is around what are my chances? I've got a GPA of X, I've got a test score of Y, right? And I want to know if, what's the likelihood of getting into, programs of a certain caliber, right? Maybe the M7. And, we as admissions consultants get this question a lot, but this is really hard to answer. And, I'll tell you why. One of the things that makes it tough is that, we see trends change from year to year when it comes to MBA admissions. And sometimes that is driven by external factors, right? Like last year, for example, the competition was more stiff because there was more demand for MBA programs. Most of the top programs saw increases in their application volume. So when things like that happen that we can't really track in real time, it's really difficult for someone like me to give someone like you a very precise answer to this type of question. So if somebody gives you a percent odds or something like that when you ask them this question, take that with a grain of salt, right? I know that it is nice to have some certainty. It's nice to understand 25% versus 75%, but things change from year to year, including the demand for MBAs, but also things change within programs as well. So one example I can think of off the top of my head is that Columbia Business School changed their process last year from rolling admissions to rounds. And as a result, they had some challenges in monitoring and managing their admissions. They admitted a lot of people in round one and then really dialed back their admits in round two. As a result, I saw people who should have gotten in or would have gotten in prior years get dinged without interviews in round 2 last year. So that was a really tough pill to swallow for some candidates who were really high on CBS and just, didn't have some of these external factors go their way. Additionally, I learned from CBS reps themselves last month at an admissions conference that they have a brand new team. So, there was a confluence of factors that affected certain individuals' chances to get into certain programs. I use that example just to illustrate that it's really difficult to forecast someone's chances. And what I encourage candidates to do is really just put their best foot forward and focus on what they can control. Next question that I get a lot of is about the best test to take, right? Many programs are accepting the GMAT and GRE. Some also accept the executive assessment. And what I hear from candidates a lot is that, they want to take the GMAT. They think that is the gold standard among business school admissions. And while that has been the case historically, admissions committees have started accepting other exams because they want to broaden the pool. They want to attract candidates from all sorts of backgrounds, and they want people to be able to take a test that speaks to their strengths. So what does that mean for you? Well, I highly recommend that you take the test that best suits your strengths and your abilities. And for some people, that's the GMAT. It is a more quant heavy, or what I should say is, like, people find the quant more difficult on the GMAT, and those who excel in that gravitate toward the GMAT. However, if your strengths are in verbal, for example, if you are strong with vocabulary and, tend to excel, just generally in verbal area, like GRE might be a better test for you. Some people like the streamlined nature of the EA and really just hone in on the programs that accept that test. So all of that to say, there is no one favorite. Many schools are taking GRE candidates in large proportions, so don't force it on the GMAT if you are stuck. You have time now to pivot. So use that time wisely. And of course, use all the resources that are available to you as well within Target Test Prep and elsewhere to make sure that you can succeed on the test that you are taking. Next question is regarding professional experience. So I do see a question about work experience, which I will address in more detail in just a few minutes. But, I mentioned earlier that business programs are really trying to attract candidates from all sorts of backgrounds. And the way to find out, where people are coming from for any particular program is to read the class profile. So if you Google class profile, MBA Booth, for example, this should be one of your first links, if not the first link that pops up. And this will show you all of the professional backgrounds of the most recent class, along with their undergrad degrees. So if you're interested in an MBA, you're self-conscious that you are not from a traditional business background, I would not worry about that and instead focus on how an MBA can help you. These MBA programs are invested in building the most diverse and interesting class. And I'm an example of that as well. I worked in entertainment prior to business school, and I didn't have the linear path that I thought, some of my peers had in consulting, banking, et cetera. But what I've learned through that experience and through my years of working with non-traditional candidates, all types can be successful in business school and in their careers afterwards. So if it is something that truly interests you, I encourage you not to self-select out of the process, right? Put your best foot forward. And obviously there are ways that we can talk about that in this conversation or another. But, if there is a path for you, or if you can see it, then, it is incumbent on you to make that story known in the application, but don't self-select out before you even get started. How do I learn more about my target programs? So you can learn a lot, of course, by going to info sessions, by reading a program's website. But I really think that the best intel that you are going to get from a program is from the students who are at that program now. As I mentioned before, I went to Ross School of Business, but that was 16 years ago that I graduated. And while I still keep in close contact with the school and admissions as part of my job, and also just as a casual observer on LinkedIn, I'm a bit removed from the student experience and what it is like today. So I think it's really important that if you are interested in a program, you interact with, reach out to people who are students and who can fill you in on what it's actually like to be there. There are a couple ways you can do that. If you have a area of interest, for example, if you're interested in real estate, I would recommend going to that club page and reaching out to the officers, because that can really clue you into what the program can offer you if that's your career path. So you can kind of get like the career side and also understand what it's like to be a student, what the student environment is, et cetera. Conversely, there are also resources that admissions puts together. And what I mean by that is many of the programs have what they call admissions ambassadors or student ambassadors. And again, easy thing to find, just Google admissions ambassadors or student ambassadors, MBA, and your target program, and you will find these people. Reach out, ask for 15 minutes of their time. Generally, they'll give you more time, but 15 minutes is an easy ask. And pepper them with questions about their experience and kind of workshop your career plans and your interest in the program and see what they have to say. This is probably going to give you a lot more nuanced information than what you are going to find online, right? Or through some of the general sessions that aren't really catered to your experience. Next, I get this one a lot too, and this is really top of mind for people who are deciding whether to apply in round 1 versus round 2. And the question is around like your chances of admission. It is almost July, so there's still a couple months before the round 1 deadlines. Typically I encourage my clients to apply to at least 1 or 2 programs in round 1 to spread the workload, but also get some decisions in before they decide to submit for round 2. However, this really doesn't affect your chances for admission. What you'll hear a lot from admissions committees is that you should apply when your application is the strongest. So if you are not where you want to be test-wise, give yourself a little more time to improve your score and apply when you have a score within the range or close to the average of your target program. I think that is, a much stronger position to be in than rushing things to get into round 1. So again, apply when your application and your candidacy overall is the strongest. Next question about post-MBA career goals. And some people come to me and have a few ideas, but don't want to commit in one direction or the other. Unfortunately, the application really wants you to have a hypothesis and communicate that as part of the process. And what I mean by a hypothesis in general is that a lot of things can happen in business school. You might learn about a new path and decide to pursue it once you get there. So admissions committees are aware of this, and they really just want to understand that you've thought this through and have done the research to understand that, you can attain a certain goal post MBA. They want to make sure that they can set you up for success. And they want to make sure that you can understand how the program can facilitate your goals to do so. So that's an important part of the application. You'll see it in short answers. You'll see it in essay questions. You'll definitely be talking about it in the interview as well. And if you are having these conversations with current students, admissions officers, et cetera, like that is definitely going to come up. It's okay if you're not sure right now. You can preface that conversation by saying that, but the whole process is about firming up your hypothesis and going in with some clear idea of what you want to do and how the business program is going to be instrumental in helping you to achieve it. Next question is about recommendations. And I know many of you have a lot of trepidation about recommendations because this is an area where you have a little less control than writing an essay, firming up your CV, interviewing, etc. But I will say, like, you can play a proactive role in your recommendation process without writing the recommendation. Many programs want to see a recommendation from your current supervisor. However, I know that in some cases, this may jeopardize your employment. It may create a rift. If a company or a supervisor knows that you are looking to leave in a year or less, that may change the dynamic of what you're experiencing professionally. So there are other avenues that you can pursue. You can talk to prior bosses, you can talk to mentors, you can talk to maybe cross-functional partners in your current position. Find people who know your work well and can speak to it through examples. If you are not able to get that recommendation from your boss, make sure that you explain the circumstances in an optional essay or in an open field near where they talk about your recommendation, because like the admissions committee wants to understand the thought process behind that decision and understand like the context of your relationship and why you picked that person. And this is the last of my pre-scheduled questions. So I will definitely be getting to the chat next, and I see a lot of good questions here. So the question here is about using AI tools like ChatGPT, et cetera, to create your application materials. If you've opened applications already, you'll probably see some disclaimers and some language about either disclosing your use of AI materials or making sure that you're using them in a responsible way. Business schools aren't dumb. They know that these tools exist. They know that, we use them in our day-to-day to brainstorm, ideate, etc. And I don't discourage the use of ChatGPT for my own clients. I think it is a great tool to brainstorm and to get started. But where the tool is today, it does not deliver the level of personalization that you need, that these essays require. So I highly recommend you use it as a starting point, but know that the admissions committees are looking for a level of authenticity and personalized information beyond what currently can be delivered. So definitely follow the instructions, answer truthfully, but remember that ChatGPT will probably not be delivering your final draft. Business schools know when an essay was written by ChatGPT. Some are using tools to detect it in their admissions process. So I would hate to see you go through the trouble of, putting something together, paying the application fee and, getting dinged because either the essay or material was not specific enough to your experiences, or, it was perceived as AI through their tools as well. In either case, it's probably not going to be a successful outcome. So just make sure you use them in the spirit in which the admissions committee is comfortable. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of Target Test Prep. If you have not signed up for test prep, either self-paced courses, live courses, or tutoring, you do have the opportunity to try us for 5 days. There is a trial, so check us out. Additionally, and I'll circle back to this at the end, and we do have MBA Admissions consulting services, either with comprehensive packages or by the hour. And you can find that on our website as well. Little detail on what all that entails. If you get an all-school package, you get to work on all of the services on the left side with a consultant like me or one of my colleagues. Conversely, you can also do any of those activities on an hourly basis, or buy them a la carte, as you see on the right side. So here's the Ask Me Anything portion. Obviously, I'll just keep this here. You can use the QR code if you want to request a consultation, but I've got a backlog of great questions, so keep them coming and I'll get through as many as I can. So the first question I have here is regarding any kind of setbacks in undergrad. This person says the undergrad GPA is not that great because this person was struggling and going through a transformative period and wants to be sure that the GPA doesn't outweigh the professional success that they'll put forth in the application. This is a very common scenario that I come across with clients. Many of us go to college, university right out of high school, and we experience some kind of shock with moving out of state, moving away from family, being in a totally different environment, whatever the case may be. And with that brings challenges, and admissions committees understand that, right? You've probably seen in the class profile that, the averages, especially among, M7 schools, for example, are quite high. And when I say averages, like the grade point average, right? But, they're really also looking at a range, right? To get to an average, you've got scores on the GPAs on the higher end, you've got GPAs on the lower end. And I have seen people be successful with subpar GPAs. I think what's really important in this case is to be forthcoming in your application about some of the challenges that you are facing and how you worked through them, and point to other examples that more accurately reflect who you are today, who you are as a person, that reflect your strengths as well. I will caveat that by saying you don't have to tell the admissions committee every sort of detail of your life. I have worked with candidates who have talked about really difficult things that they experienced, in their early lives and undergrad. They were comfortable sharing those traumas, but you absolutely do not have to if you are not comfortable. I think sharing the broad strokes, giving them enough of an understanding of what you were going through, helps to paint the picture of what was going on during your undergrad, and they will get the idea. That said, just addressing GPA alone is not exactly going to automatically qualify you for admission. You do have to offset that by strong professional performance, and it sounds like the question asker has that. So make sure that is showcased well in your resume and other application materials. I will say also, it is really difficult to pair a low GPA with a low test score and expect success at the top MBA programs. So make sure that your test score is on point and range, somewhere in an admissible area for that MBA program. And then finally, something to consider is taking a class. Can you take a class at an institution like UCLA Extension, UC Berkeley online? I like those options just because they're online, self-paced, and they award grades. I think getting the grade is really important. So if you take a class and get an A, can you point to that as a stronger example of your capabilities now that you've matured and you're a few years removed from undergrad? So those are just a few ideas of diverting attention to other strengths and high points in your candidacy. Another question, this is a great one as well. How do schools weigh each portion of the application? Who knows? If we had that, we would probably go about this process in a more formulaic way, but the reality is, you'll hear 10 out of 10 admissions directors from the top MBA programs tell you that they conduct a very holistic evaluation of candidates, where they're looking at all parts of your application, they're considering them all seriously, and they know that most candidates are not going to be perfect across the board, right? So we just talked about this scenario of a low GPA from undergrad, but this person, it sounds like, had a really successful professional career to date. And those types of things can help to offset a weak area in the application. So many programs don't have like a really hard and fast scoring rubric because they really do want to build that diverse class in terms of, perspective, background, experience. And, if they are really methodical, if they're too methodical with, a test score weighing 10%, CV 15%, et cetera, they're probably going to attract a lot of similar candidates, and they don't really want to do that, right? They want to create a diverse and interesting class. So they will not at least tell us how they weigh each portion of the application. Maybe there is a secret hidden formula behind closed doors, but to my current knowledge, that is not the case, even at the top programs. Next question is from someone who comes from a non-traditional background. I don't have a lot of quantitative experience. Is a high GRE quant score even more important than it would be for candidates coming from a traditional background? I think so. I think, you have to, if you are coming from a non-traditional background, you don't have the quant experience. You have to think about, what is the admissions committee optimizing for? Because this still, at the end of the day, yes, it is a professional experience where you will be leveraging the MBA to expand your network capabilities and land a different position following graduation. But also it's an academic experience, and the admissions committee wants the confidence that you can handle the rigor of the coursework, and many of it is quant related. So a couple different ways you can show this. If it's not in your undergrad transcript, that's okay. That was the case for me. You've got to show that in the test score. You can show that by taking a quant course and getting an A, and or highlighting some of the analytical work you do professionally, if that's the case, right? There might be something to showcase in your resume that shows like how that part of your brain works. But if not, I would lean on the test score, the quant portion, along with potentially taking a class and getting an A, just to demonstrate that you can succeed with the material. I got a general question. How important is work experience? And I wouldn't say like this is, weighted in any similar way, kind of back to, how much does it, is weighted in the application. But it is an important piece. Like, after all, like, people are going to, pursue an MBA because they want to either further or improve the career that they're in right now, or change careers. So you have to have some understanding of, where you are, what you're good at, and how that is going to translate into your career going forward, whether you're accelerating or switching your career. You'll probably see in the class profiles, like many of the top programs average somewhere between 4 and 6 years of work experience. So they really are looking for a cohort that has been in, the professional world for a few years and has something to contribute to class discussions. I'll caveat that by saying that's an average. You will find people with fewer years of experience. You'll find people with more years of experience. I remember one of my peers in business school, he was in his 40s. He was on the top end for the full-time program, and he had done a lot of things in his career, including being a newscaster. So a lot of different types of people can find their way into business school, and that is one of the ways that these programs are selecting for diversity in the program. I will say that the people who are on the lower end of the number of years of work experience have something special, right? Maybe they, they're on a fast track where they're working, or they have a really novel business idea to pursue. Business schools really want to understand that you are, clear-eyed on as to why you're going to pursue an MBA, and also have the maturity to succeed in the program as well. Question about dual degrees. I think this is a good one. If I apply to dual degree programs, am I being measured against all other MBA applicants, or am I being measured against other dual degree applicants? This depends on the institution, right? Some programs you send kind of 2 applications in. Of course, you check the box on which one you're interested in. There are others, and I think Wharton JD MBA is like this. You will apply, but you'll get 1 decision. So for that, like, they are evaluating you versus all the other JD MBA candidates. So in some, it really depends. I often get asked, like, does this improve my chances? Not necessarily. Like, you still have to meet the criteria for both programs. And I would say too, like, if you end up, applying and getting into one program and you're really interested in that dual degree still, I have seen people have success by going and starting the MBA, for example, and then, not working their way into that dual degree program of interest once they're on campus. Question about post MBA plans. This person wants to know, how specific do I need to be? And that is a good question, because it's one thing to say you want to do marketing, and another thing to say you want to do product marketing at a large tech company like Google or Meta. That second answer is more along the lines of what admissions committees are looking for. Some fields are just too broad, right? Marketing's too broad, finance is too broad. You need to get more specific as to, what type of that function you want to do, what type of company you want to work at, maybe a couple target companies. That's what I push my clients to articulate. It's not to say you're only going to recruit with those companies. Notice I use language saying a company like Google or Meta, right? It's just to give them an idea of, what are your potential targets? What type of company do you mean? Like, even just saying startup, there's lots of different types of startups depending on their level of funding. So I would even push someone to get more specific when they say they want to work at a startup. A 5-12 person startup is different than working at a startup that is 100 people or more. So, like, that's the level of specificity that I would push you to articulate. So again, that's, industry, function, type of company, couple target companies as well. Somebody else is asking about non-traditional careers, and this is someone who also has a BFA like me, wondering what I think was the strongest point in my application and helped with my acceptance. So when I applied, I had a strong GPA, I had a strong test score. I also took a course and got an A. I took an econ course and got an A. And I will preface this by saying I applied in 2006. So this was 18 years ago. And certainly the process has evolved since, but what I will address are things that have remained true throughout the years. So I think showing that I could handle the standardized test and handle the curriculum through my undergrad transcript, but also through a more recent class really helped me. And then it was just being really clear about my goals, what I wanted to do. I was working in film production and then talent management, and I talked about some transferable skills. And I think this is important for anyone changing careers. I'm going to talk about like what you're good at and how that transfers into the future career. So for me as a marketer or an aspiring marketer, I really talked about, understanding an audience, because, that was part of, what I developed in film development in my first job, and my ability to communicate. I thought that was one of my strong points. And I really kind of tied that up nicely to transfer, or talk about how that would transfer rather to a marketing career. At the time, I was interested in pursuing consumer goods marketing because like that was really like the popular and strong track for marketers. But about 2 weeks into school, I realized what that actually was, and I just thought maybe that's not the path for me. And instead, I ended up pursuing tech. So all of that to say, if you are switching careers, think about the transferable skills you have that will enable you to be successful in that job and identifying what you need from the MBA, right? How is the MBA going to be that bridge to the future? What are the skills, competencies, knowledge, network that you need from the program that will help you fill the gaps to be successful in that job? How much do schools weigh GPA relative to your undergrad school? So for example, this person had a 3.75 from undergrad. So is there a difference in how that's perceived versus something similar from a higher ranked undergrad school? Okay. So yeah, programs do look at the relative strength of the programs. Admissions looks at the relative strength of different programs. So like a 4.0 from Harvard undergrad is going to be a little different from a 4.0 at Florida State, for example, and no knock on Florida State. A 4.0 though is excellent, right? I would say, this person's talking about a 3.75. What the admissions committee is going to do is like take a look at the, difficulty of coursework, take a look at your major, understand a little beneath the hood, because they're trying to recruit an interesting class. And it's not that interesting if they're pulling from the same institution or the same types of institutions. So a lot of people despair, like, oh, I didn't come from like a target school. But what I found in my experience and what I've found in the years since is like it's less about the brand and more about, how did you perform? How has your career progressed since? And, how do you package that into your case for pursuing an MBA? There's a question about someone who did 2 years at a community college and 2 years at uh, UC Berkeley. And basically only the Berkeley GPA counts for the application. I'm currently working at a top investment bank. How can I offset my low GPA and be a stronger candidate? For this scenario, I would say, you've got to knock that test out of the park. It kind of depends on what you also want to do, right? Like you're in investment banking now. If you want to continue, you probably know already it's a competitive field for people coming out of MBAs. So, get a great test score and also really showcase all of the great work you've done in your resume and other materials as applicable. Like if you've got to quantify that impact, you've got to demonstrate where you've gone out of the way and taken initiative professionally. Consider taking a course to offset that lower GPA and do everything you can to divert the attention to where your strengths are. There's a question about grad school GPA as well as undergrad GPA. This person's grad school GPA is better than undergrad GPA. That's great. I think admissions committees, they won't admit this, but they do have some recency bias when they're evaluating your professional career and your master's degree versus undergrad if you have a master's already. So I think that trajectory is preferable to having the opposite, right? A strong undergrad and a weaker grad degree. So, if you are up into the right, if you're improving your performance, I think that is looked at favorably by admissions committees. This person's been a business owner for 8 years. Is it a better option to apply for an executive MBA than a regular MBA? I've worked with business owners who have more experience along the lines of 8 years or more. And I would say it really depends on what you want to do. Some entrepreneurs want to get out of the business that they're in. Maybe they're selling it or, they're handing over the day-to-day management and they want to do something else. You could make the case for the full-time MBA in that instance, if you really want to immerse yourself in the program and get that, full experience. However, like there might be programs that like encourage you to apply for the EMBA. Do you want to stay in that career or that line of work? That might make more sense. I will say that, admissions criteria standards are slightly different across the MBA versus the full-time MBA. So depending on where your test score, GPA, the other materials land, like you might have a better shot at a stronger program within EMBA. I don't know enough about you to say that for certain, but I have seen that in the past. Question about scholarships. This is a good one. What is the best way to receive scholarships for MBA programs? The sticker price is so much. Yes, it is. It is crazy how expensive tuition has gotten. And then depending on where you're going, New York City can be expensive, right? Cost of living can add up. And if you don't have any financial aid of any kind, this is a big investment that still hopefully will pay off, but it is a lot to take on. In your case, like in many scenarios, merit scholarships are awarded with admission, or, the process is the same. So you don't have to do something separate to be considered for scholarships. I will note that there are other programs out there like the Consortium, Questbridge, Forte, and others that, appeal to, that attract certain groups, et cetera, like affinity groups, whatever, that also offer aid. So I would recommend you check out those programs, see if you, qualify. If you don't, not a big deal. Like I wasn't in any of those programs and I still got a scholarship to Ross. So it's possible just to apply and win a scholarship. And I would say too, like definitely get your application in by round 1 or 2, because the scholarships are tougher to come by in the later rounds, as are admissions on the whole. Someone's asking about the application differences between the full-time MBA and the exec MBA application. Is the time and effort the same? Is there any major difference between them application wise? Some programs use the same application, some streamline them a little bit for the EMBA. I think, the biggest difference is like the pool that you're competing with, really. The full-time programs for certain universities, for many of them, really tend to be more competitive, right? So you are competing with a different cohort for the EMBA. They have more experience. Maybe they don't have time to take the GMAT or GRE 3 times, right? And many of them are like satisfied with the career they're in, or at least want to stay in the same like general field, if not the same company. So it's just a little bit of a a different cohort, and it really depends on the program in terms of like the relative degree of difficulty and time that you will put into the application. There's a good question about undergrad degrees. So this person says, I got 2 degrees in undergrad and now I'm not working in either field. Do I need to explain why I'm not working in either field affiliated with my undergrad degrees? Not really. A lot of people get degrees in fields where they don't find jobs. Like I have a background in fine art, but that, aside from the ability to, critique works of art and, translate that ability to film scripts, like I'm not using that, like I do art from time to time, but I don't need to explain why I'm not using an art degree to a business program. It is because I have an art degree that I applied to a business program. So I see that across a lot of my clients as well. Maybe they just studied something of interest, psychology, sociology, literature, you name it. Like people study all sorts of things, and it makes you a well-rounded, interesting person, but it's okay if you don't pursue that as a job, right? Like some degrees just don't naturally translate to the career that you want or the one that you land in, and that's totally okay. I don't think you need to explain it unless it's some extreme scenario that I just don't have enough information on. Good question about a test waiver. So do MBA programs look down on applying for a test waiver? No. If you are a CFA or something like that, and have strong work experience that's very quant heavy in nature, and that's just one example. There's many examples that might qualify you for a waiver depending on the program. That will not affect your admissions decision. They're just going to take that off the table. And I would say too, if like they're confident in awarding you a waiver, they're not really concerned about your ability to handle the curriculum, right? So all in all, if they have a waiver process and you think you qualify, and if it saves you time and enables you to put more time into the application materials, I say go for it. It's nice with some programs, you can get that decision ahead of time. I think Darden's one of them. Others, you have to apply for the waiver with submitting the application, and that I think makes it a little more challenging. But yeah, I'd say go for it. And if you don't get the waiver, that's not a ding on you either. Good question about career pathing. So this person says that their career has been all over the place, from banking to investor relationship, from banking to investor relations to entrepreneurship. How can I connect my story better to make sense as to why I am where I am? I don't have all the details on your decision making, but that's where the essays and storytelling really make sense, right? I can see a connection from banking to investor relations, right? Curious about the field of entrepreneurship, right? Like, did you do something banking or IR related, or something in finance? Then there is a through line of financial services potentially. I help people with this all the time, and it is an iterative process and requires more input to give you a stronger answer. But I've seen far stranger career trajectories, so I'm not too worried about this story or the potential of this story making sense to admissions committees. Great question on interviewing. So this person asks, if you make it to the interview phase of the application process, how high are the chances of getting accepted? This really depends from year to year and who you're competing with. So it's another answer that depends and won't get a hard and fast answer. But I will say, like, the programs, MBA programs, especially the competitive ones, do not interview everyone, right? Like Kellogg's the only exception. They'll interview everyone. That's part of their process, and it has been for a long time. But most programs extend interview invitations to people that they consider admissible at that stage of the process. It's not to say it's a sure thing, it's a slam dunk, but generally your chances have improved by being invited to the interview. Plenty of people don't get in past the interview, and it's incumbent on you to communicate well and advance your candidacy. But I couldn't give you a hard and fast percentage, because there's just too many variables across, like how competitive that year is, what the volume is like, how competitive the institution is, etc. That is the end of our questions. So this was a really great mix. Oh, I have another question about connecting with current students. This person comes from a non-traditional background, doesn't have many connections in business school. Is it appropriate to reach out to students on LinkedIn? Should I be engaging with professors and faculty? I would really focus on engaging with students. Like, professors and faculty might have an interesting point of view, but it's not something we typically see for the admissions exercise, and they're a little removed from the student experience and some of the extracurriculars and programming that some of these MBA programs have. So my advice would be to start with current students. You can find me there on LinkedIn, or as I mentioned earlier, like if you have an area of interest, right? Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's fintech, there's plenty of different like professional clubs that will help you locate officers who are involved in the club, and generally you can find their email address on those club pages. So that's one way. I mentioned earlier the student ambassadors or admissions ambassadors, depending on the program. These are people who have raised their hands and said like they want to be part of the process, part of recruiting and outreach for the admissions team. And admissions teams really rely on them heavily to fill prospective students in on what that experience is like, because admissions is a little removed from it, right? Like not everyone from that team has gone to that school, right? Or if they have, like me, they're several years out. So engaging with the current student will really help you understand, how the program can facilitate your goals if you have goals in common, or what it's like to live in that city or be on that campus, right? So finding them through club pages, ambassador sites, filtering for your interests, your career goals, etc. I think that would be, super valuable. As I said earlier, ask for 15 minutes of time. Often you'll get more, right? But 15 minutes is something easy for someone to commit to. And if they don't have the time, send the questions by email, right? Make sure they're catered though towards that person's experience and what you specifically want to learn. Don't ask them things that you can find on the website, like average GMAT, for example. Not very interesting when you can easily find that elsewhere. Like you want to ask them pointed questions on why they picked that program, what the resources are available to them as, someone switching careers into marketing, for example, and, what professors they liked, what it's like living in that town, what they like about it, what they hate about it. Get to the nitty gritty of their experiences. People who volunteer for those roles are happy to share their experiences, and they're generally happy in that program. So you learn a lot in a short amount of time. We have a question on recommendations. So this person said, if I can submit multiple recommendations, is it beneficial to do so? And they're wondering like, who is the best person to submit a recommendation? So it sounds like you have like somewhat of a different career path where you don't have a necessarily like a direct supervisor. So someone you are, dotted line connected to through this related program you're describing, a mentor, someone who knows who you are as, a leader, as someone who is contributing to a business, who can speak to your impact and who can compare you to, other, say, entrepreneurs, I think would be really interesting rather. And this person also asked, like, what are some of the basic tips and key points to emphasize in writing an essay or a resume? And there's really like not one size fits all answer to that, because everyone's coming from diverse career backgrounds and has different things to say. Now, I will say the resume needs to showcase your professional impact. What I mean by that is like each of your bullet points should be achievements. You can leave the responsibilities for the data form. There will be questions about your day-to-day responsibilities elsewhere in the application, but your resume really needs to talk about where you've had an impact, show results, use metrics wherever possible. And of course, I said professional impact earlier, but it's important to include your education and extracurriculars you had in undergrad or in your master's program if you went to one. Additionally, the last section should be about your volunteering and extracurriculars now. So what keeps you busy outside of work when you're not, doing your day-to-day job, right? What are you interested in? Where have you volunteered? What's important to you? And make it as specific as possible. It's not enough to say travel. Everyone likes to travel, or at least a lot of people who apply for MBAs. So much more meaningful if you talk about what kind of travel you like to do, what some of your favorite destinations are, what you like to do there, etc. Someone asked, on the topic of recommendations, is it better to get a recommendation from someone who graduated the MBA I'm applying to? I'll say it depends, right? How well acquainted with you and your experience is this person? Last year I worked with a candidate who was kind of strategizing. We were working through a process for HBS, and she actually did have one of her supervisors went to HBS. Do I think that's the difference maker in her acceptance? I mean, it was a strong recommendation because this person knew her well and had amazing examples. So, her whole package had to be strong for that to be successful. I don't think that is as important as picking someone who can speak to your successes and your personal qualities with specific examples. But if there are times to be strategic, right, where you need to kind of pull from a pool of recommenders and make sure not everyone has, an insane number of recommendations to write, it might make sense to, find the grad of that program, so long as they have lots of things to say about you, to write that particular recommendation. Another question about revision process, for essays and personal statements. Who should be asked to review essays, and how many eyes is too eyes? Is too many eyes, right there. This is a great question because, I've worked with candidates from on the process from end to end for a long time, and I have also encountered times where they've, shared their work with their family. And, I definitely recommend that if, we're working together on the nuts and bolts of the application. Sometimes we get too close to it and, we might miss something, or I might not know that person well enough to make certain recommendations that could improve the authenticity of the application. However, people can be well intended, but not know the ins and outs of the MBA application process. And it is very specific. It's different from law school, dental school, you name it, right? Like each of these professional programs has their criteria and their things that they're looking for. And sometimes a family member or friend can be well-meaning, but they don't know enough about the process to provide valuable feedback. So if you get feedback from a person like that, I recommend that, they just check it for grammar, spelling, authenticity, right? Does it ring true to who you are, your stories, your lived experiences? Then great. I think there are points of diminishing returns, right? If you have half a dozen or more people reading your materials and you're hearing a lot of different things, that can be really disruptive to your process. I don't want to say there's like a perfect number because it really depends on the quality of feedback you're getting. But I have seen people get derailed, and this can happen really easily if you have too many people reading your essays, and especially too many people who don't know enough about the process weighing in. There is another question about someone who is working while attending college full-time. I've seen this in the past, and it's tricky because it does have an effect on someone's grades. And it sounds like that was the case for this person. So would a combination of that experience along with strong GMAT scores be sufficient to be accepted in M7 despite having a low college GPA? I've been working in corporate finance in the last few years and have grown significantly since. Look, you have the averages in front of you, right? These programs get more competitive year after year, but a GPA average is just an average. They're going to look at the quality of your work experience. You're going to explain the context of your undergrad GPA. I don't know enough about you to know that you're, a good candidate for M7, right? Like that would be I just don't know, have enough information to say like, oh yeah, you're a great candidate for that. I don't have a test score. I don't have your life story. I don't understand how you're differentiated from other candidates. So there's a lot more to unpack there. And I would say to you or anyone, like if you're interested, just book some time with me and we can talk through your scenario and I can give you some pointers to kind of help you navigate the process a little more effectively. Well, we are at an hour. I've talked nonstop and we are at the end of the questions. So thank you guys all so much. I hope this format was valuable to you. And I love the specificity of your questions. I'm sorry I can't give you super specific answers because I don't have all the inputs, but thanks again for taking part, and hope you have a great night. Take care.